3. Implications of becoming a charity. Being a registered charity brings certain benefits to an organization, but also several challenges and regulatory obligations. Before applying for registration, you should satisfy yourself that the benefits outweigh these challenges and obligations, and that there is no better alternative available for you. A. Benefits of being a registered charity. There are 3 basic advantages of being a registered charity. Registered charities can issue official tax receipts to donors, receive favorable income tax treatment, and benefit from the perception that their organization is doing good work. Issuing official receipts. Tax receipts provide a benefit to donors and can be a significant factor in strengthening fundraising activities. Consider the impact of tax receipting on the following types of potential donors. Individual donors. Individuals benefit by using charitable tax receipts to reduce the amount of income tax they pay. Business donors. Some businesses can benefit by reducing their taxable income based on receipted donations. But many businesses support charities by sponsorship rather than donations, and these expenditures are often a tax-deductible business expense. In this case, a tax receipt is of no additional benefit to the business. Foundations and charitable organizations. Foundations and charitable organizations are generally able to make gifts only to organizations that are registered charities. Registered charities that receive such gifts should not issue tax receipts for them, however. Governments. Governments are not limited in who they provide funds to, although some government programs may fund only registered charities. Receiving favorable tax treatment. Registered charities do not pay income tax on their earnings. When it comes to the goods and services tax or harmonized sales tax or Quebec sale tax, charities are actually in a less favorable position relative to businesses. Whereas businesses generally get back through input tax credits all of the GST, HST, QST that they pay, charities normally are rebated only half of the tax they pay. This can be a more significant issue in some situations than income taxes, particularly if the charity is not anticipating a surplus of revenues over expenditures, since it must pay GST, HST, QST as applicable. Benefiting from the perception that the organization is doing good work. Being a registered charity evokes a positive image in the minds of most Canadians. This encourages people to support charities. It is also often a factor in the mind of the individual behind a charity's formation. Some Canadians feel that registered charities are regulated and overseen to a greater degree than are other nonprofits, and so have a greater degree of confidence when donating. While they are indeed subject to more regulation, fulfilling the regulatory obligations and retaining charitable status is not trivial. These obligations must be balanced against the benefits outlined above. B. Regulatory obligations of a registered charity. Registered charities are governed by the relevant requirements of the Income Tax Act. Registered charities must 1. Devote its resources to charitable purposes and activities. Registered charities must devote their resources to the charitable purposes and activities identified in their applications for registration. Sometimes registered charities unintentionally drift away from their original purposes and activities. A church running a religious camp may start offering more sporting activities than religious ones, for example. Also, sometimes charities make an intentional decision to change their purposes and activities. Any new purposes and activities must also be recognized as charitable under the law. Charities should therefore contact the Canada Revenue Agency before making any changes to check that the new purposes and activities will not create problems. Also, when changes are made, the charity must notify the Canada Revenue Agency and provide documents explaining the changes. To learn more, see Making a Change to Your Organization. 2. Direct and control how it uses its resources. Registered charities are allowed to operate in two ways. A, by carrying on their own activities. B, by giving resources to qualified donees. Carrying on their own activities. A charity can carry out its own activities either by using its own staff and volunteers or by working with outside individuals and groups. For example, a Canadian registered charity could ship supplies to a foreign country for disaster relief and hire someone in that country to distribute the supplies. When a charity is working with outside individuals and groups, it must maintain direction and control over the use of its resources and be able to demonstrate this direction and control. A registered charity cannot just hand over resources to another organization unless that organization is a qualified donee. To ensure the charity retains control and direction and can demonstrate this, it is a good idea to sign a written agreement. To learn more about things that should be included in these agreements, see Using an Intermediary. Giving resources to a qualified donee. Registered charities can also carry out their missions by making gifts to qualified donees. These gifts can include money and property, but not services. The written agreements mentioned above are not required when giving gifts to qualified donees. Qualified donees include other registered charities, the United Nations and its agencies, Canadian municipalities, registered Canadian amateur athletic associations, registered National Arts Service organizations, certain housing corporations providing low-cost housing to the elderly, some universities outside Canada that have students from Canada, a few foreign charities. For a complete list of qualified donees, see Qualified Donees listings. 3. File an annual information return. Each year, a registered charity must file an information return and financial statements with the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA. A return is a kind of form. The form, called a T3010, is mailed to charities, but can also be downloaded from CRA's website, filled out electronically, and saved as you work through it. The return must be filed within 6 months after the end of the charity's fiscal period. A fiscal period is the 12 months, for incorporated charities this can be up to 53 weeks, covered by the organization's financial statements. For example, if a charity's fiscal period runs from April 1st to March 31st, it must file an information return by September 30th. Note that most of the information on the return and the accompanying financial statements are available to the public on the CRA website. CRA sends charities a summary of the return after it has been processed. The summary has some reported and recalculated financial numbers. Charities should make sure the summary is correct and keep a copy since it will be needed for filing the next year. If a charity needs to correct information on a return after it is filed, it should file a Form T1240 to make the correction. See CRA's website or call to get a copy. Here are some common problems with information returns. Using the wrong form. Not providing all information requested. Not providing dates of birth of directors. These are required so two people with the same name are not confused. Not providing financial statements. Not providing all required attachments. Not including the basic information sheet, even if the information has not changed from the previous year. Four, issue complete and accurate receipts for donations. Being able to issue an official donation receipt for income tax purposes is often seen as one of the main advantages of becoming a registered charity. These receipts can reduce the income tax owed by people or businesses that donate to registered charities, so they can encourage donations. However, there is no legal requirement for a registered charity to issue receipts for donations. Issuing receipts involves an administrative burden, so some charities decide not to issue them. Other charities only issue them in certain cases, for example, for donations above a certain amount. If your charity chooses to limit receipts, it can be a good idea to tell donors about your policy. You can also refer donors to Giving to Charity Information for Donors for more information. If a charity does decide to issue receipts, there are rules to follow. Please see Issuing Receipts for more details. 5. Keep proper books and records. Registered charities must keep adequate books and records, in English or French, at the Canadian address listed with the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA. It is a good idea to keep a backup copy somewhere else. Even if the charity has an outside person prepare some documents, such as an accountant or bookkeeper, it is still responsible for meeting all the requirements regarding adequate books and records. These books and records must allow CRA to check the charity's revenues, money it brings in, such as donations. Check that the charity's resources are spent on charitable activities. Check that the charity's purposes and activities continue to be charitable. What are books and records? They include financial statements, bank statements, income tax records, expense accounts, copies of official donation receipts, governing documents, constitution, trust document, letters, patent, etc., minutes of meetings, annual reports, annual information forms, accounting ledgers, fundraising materials, and written agreements. Books and records also include the documents that are the backup for records or provide proof a transaction took place. These include purchase orders and receipts, bank deposit slips, invoices, canceled checks, credit card receipts, work orders, delivery slips, emails, and correspondence. Do the books and records have to be in paper format? Charities can keep these books and records in paper format or in an electronic format that is readable. How long must the books and records be kept? Duplicate donation receipts must be kept for 2 years from the end of the calendar year in which the donation was made. For example, for a donation made April 1st, 2010, a copy of the receipt must be kept until December 31st, 2012. Other records must be kept longer. To learn more, consult the Books and Records section on the CRA website. Six, engage only in allowable activities. A charity is generally required to engage only in charitable activities that support its charitable objects. I. Avoid prohibited political activities. This is an area that is often confusing for registered charities or groups thinking about registering. Here are the basic rules. Charities cannot have political purposes, only political activities. Purposes are the reasons for which a charity is created. Activities are the programs and projects a charity uses to achieve its purposes. All partisan political activities are prohibited. Partisan means activities that involve support for or opposition to a political party or candidate for public office. However, a registered charity can take a position similar to that of a party or candidate on an issue as long as it does not directly connect its views to the party or candidate. For example, a registered charity cannot publish an article in its newsletter supporting the re-election of a candidate who shares a position on an issue the charity is facing. Hand out pamphlets during an election campaign saying that a proposed law it supports did not become law because elected members of a minority party voted against it. It would be acceptable if the pamphlet mentioned how politicians for all parties voted. Invite 2 candidates to speak at its annual meeting, but give one candidate more time to speak. Nonpartisan political activities are allowed. These include activities aimed at influencing law, policy, and public opinion on issues related to a charity's purposes. For example, a registered charity whose purpose is to improve the welfare of children can take a position on laws in the area of child welfare, organize mailing campaigns to politicians or the public, publish a statement of its position in newspapers. Any positions taken by the charity must be informative, accurate, and well-reasoned, that is, based on factual information that is fairly and fully analyzed. Any nonpartisan political activities must directly help the charity accomplish its purposes. Even when it is involved in nonpartisan political activities, only a small amount of a registered charity's resources can be used for these activities. up to 10% for larger charities, and up to 20% for smaller ones. Note that when a charity makes a gift to a qualified donee to support political activities by the qualified donee, this gift must be counted as part of these percentages, both for the charity making the gift and for the qualified donee. For more information, see Other Acceptable Activities Permitted Within Certain Limits. There are activities charities might assume fall into the political category, but in fact they do not. Depending on the circumstances, the following sometimes don't count as political and therefore aren't included in the percentages. Public awareness campaigns, talking to politicians and public officials, publishing or distributing a written statement given to a politician or public official. To learn more about political purposes and activities, see Political Activities. 2. Avoid prohibited business activities. A registered charity categorized as either a charitable organization or public foundation can carry on a business related to its purposes, mission. But charities categorized as private foundations are not allowed to carry out any business activities. Business refers to activities carried out on a regular basis that generate money from providing goods or services with the intention of earning a profit. Remember, only related businesses are allowed. What is a related business? There are two kinds. A business runs 90% or more by volunteers. B, a business linked to the charity's purposes and subordinate to those purposes. Subordinate means the business remains a minor activity in relation to the charity's other activities and that the business is carried out to support the charity's main mission. Here are examples of businesses that could be considered to be linked and subordinate, and therefore allowed. A hospital operating a parking lot, cafeteria, or gift shop. A university running a student bookstore and dining halls. A church renting out space in its parking lot on weekdays when it is not running activities. A group running an animal shelter selling pens with the group's logo. Some activities are usually not considered to be a business. This means they don't have to fall within the two types of related businesses to be allowed: to ask for donations, to sell donated goods, to charge fees charged for programs and services, for example, museum admissions, as long as the fees are to cover the cost of the activity, not make a profit. To do fundraising activities, as long as they are not a continuous activity. But if the event is held often, for example, a weekly raffle, it might be considered to be a business. To receive getting income from prudent investments. For more examples of businesses that are allowed or prohibited, see What is a related business? 3. Respect the rules on social activities. A charity created for charitable purposes can devote some of its resources to social activities if the goal of the social activities is to raise funds for its charitable purposes, or the social activities are a very small part of its activities. The general guideline is that up to 10% of a charity's resources can be devoted to social activities. Four, follow the rules on fundraising. The main rule to remember is that fundraising is not in and of itself charitable and cannot become the main emphasis of a charity. Spending on fundraising, therefore, usually cannot be reported as spending on charitable activities on the annual information return charities must file. Also, the Canada Revenue Agency has suggested guidelines about how much can be spent on fundraising in relation to the money it brings in. There are also guidelines about certain fundraising practices, such as paying commissions to professional fundraisers. To learn more, see Fundraising by Registered Charities. Finally, charities raising money through lotteries, bingos, charity casinos, and other similar activities should make sure they follow any provincial rules on these activities. What happens if a registered charity doesn't meet these obligations? Penalties for not meeting these obligations can include fines, suspension of the right to issue tax receipts for donations, and even cancellation of a charity's registration. Now that you've weighed the pros and cons of becoming a registered charity and you've decided it is right for your organization, the next step is to incorporate.